Classic Sonic games have always had memorable boss fights, but Sonic the Hedgehog 3 feels like a real turning point. When compared to the first two games, these fights feel like they are a clear step forward, and while they're not as experimental as something like, let's say, Sonic CD, they're definitely no slouch when it comes to trying out fresh ideas. The bosses in Sonic 3 are varied and surprisingly cinematic, which makes them feel more ambitious than what came beforehand. Whether it's clever mechanics, dramatic setups, or just pure style, these fights feel like the real highlights of the game, and not just obstacles between zones. The even simpler bosses have a level of polish and personality that set them apart from what came before. That's not to say they are all perfect though. A few are over in a flash if I'm honest, and others lean a little bit too hard on a particular gimmick. But taken as a whole, this might be one of the strongest lineups in any 2D Sonic game. So, today we're going to rank every boss in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 from worst to best. Just to be clear though, this is the Sonic 3 portion of the game, and Sonic and Knuckles will be getting its own video. That is due to there actually being more boss fights in this game overall, as each act gets its own mini-boss, as well as each zone getting a boss at the end of it. Each boss will be scored out of 15 points across 3 categories. The challenge, how tough or demanding the fight actually is. Enjoyment, this is how satisfying it is to beat or how fun I found it personally. And design, this is the visual creativity and a little bit of that signature Sonic flair, you know? And without further ado, let's get into it. Here is every Sonic 3 boss ranked from worst to best. Tunnelbot. Tunnelbot is without question the weakest boss in Sonic 3. Worse still, it's strikingly similar to the Egg Digger boss from Sonic 2's Mystic Cave Zone, offering little more than a, visual palette swap and maybe a new arena. In a game that constantly pushes for mechanical variety, this fight just feels like it's on autopilot. Challenge, it's a 1 out of 5. There's almost no resistance here. Tunnelbot emerges from beneath the ground in a set pattern, giving players plenty of time to react, or more accurately, exploit. Once you know where it's going to appear, you can chain hits easily, often ending the fight before it even gets a chance to respond. And unfortunately, there's no second phase or escalation, no surprise, nothing. Enjoyment, it's a 2 out of 5. While it's not offensively bad, to me it's just not that interesting either. Tunnelbot isn't broken, but it is kinda boring. There's no mechanical satisfaction in beating it, no tension during the fight, and just no scale of spectacle. It's a boss that just kinda happens and then you're like, ugh, anyway. The fact that it's nearly a copy of Sonic 2's boss only hurts it more in my opinion. The fight wasn't a standout then, and it's even less engaging now. There's no twist or adding mechanic to the original idea either, and even the pattern is somewhat similar. Even nostalgia cannot save a boss, because the nostalgia here is what, from 2 years prior? So yeah, unfortunately, doesn't score too well in the enjoyment section. Design, it's a 2 out of 5. Thematically, I guess Tunnelbot fits the setting well enough. It looks like an underground drilling machine, and I guess that's what it is. Visually, it blends into Marvel God of Zone's earth and stone aesthetic without clashing too much. But as with the gameplay, there's just not much to latch onto here. It's a flat arena with a flat boss, and the design reflects the lack of ambition here. Final score, it's a 5 out of 15. Tunnelbot isn't a disaster despite all the negativity I've just given it. It feels more like a missed opportunity. It's the one boss in Sonic 3 that feels like it wasn't given the same creative attention as the rest. It lacks challenge, variety, and identity. It borrows from past ideas without improving on them, and what's left is a fight that's mechanically dull and emotionally flat. The Freezemobile. The Freezemobile is a blink and you'll miss it boss fight that closes out Ice Cap Zone with bare minimum of resistance. It's incredibly short, incredibly easy, and almost shockingly low stakes, especially coming in right after Big Istus. Challenge, it's a 1 out of 5. This is arguably the easiest boss in the entire game. Whether you decide to damage boost through the cold gas, or carefully dodge each puff, the fight's over in under 15 seconds either way. The freezing gas attack is predictable, slow, and easy to dodge, and Eggman doesn't mix things up with movement or variation. There's no real pressure, no risk of failure unless you're trying to get hit either. Even for newer players, the encounter poses almost no threat. I remember finding it really easy on my first playthrough, for example. It's the definition of a freebie. which might be fine for pacing, but leaves almost no room for tension or excitement. Enjoyment is a 3 out of 5. Strangely, despite how easy and basic it is, Freezemobile manages to be kind of fun. The entire second act of Ice Cap Zone is amazing. Like, I love the entire zone, but the second act of Ice Cap is a chef's kiss. And it's built around speed and momentum, and this boss doesn't interrupt that flow. It just puts a pretty little bow on top. There's sort of a casual satisfaction in speeding through the fights with clean hits, especially if you're aiming to clean the stage as quickly as possible. Design is a 2 out of 5. Unfortunately, this boss suffers heavily in the visual and conceptual department. The mech itself is bland, and one of the least interesting Eggman machines in the entire game. And the fact Eggman just hovers above the player and lowers down a platform that you can easily use to attack him, I mean, come on Eggman, you could have done better than that. There's no ingenuity here, no clever trick, just a low hovering target. The background is nearly identical to the Big Eistus fight also, with the only real difference being the shift from nighttime to daytime, which is also a downgrade in my opinion. While there's a small touch of continuity, it comes at the cost of the eerie atmosphere that made the Big Eistus fight amazing, so yeah, I can't really award too many points here either. Final score is a 6 out of 15. Freezemobile is as close to a throwaway boss as Sonic 3 gets, to be honest. It's over so quickly that it offers almost no challenge, and brings very little to the table in terms of design or spectacle. While it's undeniably on a low point mechanically, it's not without any merit whatsoever. The fight fits the pacing and the fast-paced nature of Ice Cap 2, and, you know, it brings in the freezing mechanics as well. While it may not impress, it doesn't annoy me either. It's painless and relatively harmless. Bowling Spin. Bowling Spin is an unusual boss, and not necessarily in a good way. It slows the pace dramatically. Enjoyment is a 2 out of 5. This is a fight that demands a little bit of patience though, and unfortunately, it's not always a good thing in a Sonic game. The slow pace and lack of urgency can make the encounter feel, let's say, tedious rather than tense. For players who prefer snappy responses style of gameplay, which Sonic 3 usually delivers in abundance, this boss feels like it's dragging its feet a little bit. Design is a 2 out of 5. Visually and conceptually, Bowling Spin is a mixed bag. The arena is unique, and the boss's attacks at least make some physical sense within that layout. The launching disc attack, and the Atari breakout style, at least that's how I interpret it, is goofy in a way that would have definitely worked better in Sonic CD. There's a strange experimental energy to it, like the designers were testing out physics-based gimmicks in a game that doesn't really work in Sonic, much like the pinball one in the last game for example. Final score is a 6 out of 15. Bowling Spin is the definition of experimental. It's slow, hands-off, and mostly passive, which makes it stand out in a game full of high-speed and engaging encounters. And standing out isn't a good thing in this instance. The fight lacks tension, impact, and ends up being more of a yawn fest rather than, you know, fun. Ball Shooter. Ball Shooter is a curious boss that tries to inject variety in Sonic 3's roster of encounters. And while it's unique in concept and presentation, it ultimately didn't land as well as it could have. The fight feels, once more, I'd say experimental. Challenge is a 2 out of 5. This boss doesn't pose much of a threat once you understand the pattern. It cycles between 2 basic attack nodes and a set of rolling energy balls, followed by a brief vulnerability window. If you time your jumps and stay patient, the danger is minimal. The attacks are consistent and easy to read, and there's no major environmental hazard to complicate the fight. Enjoyment is a 2 out of 5. To its credit, the Ball Shooter did try something different. It's not just another hit the mech until it explodes. Well, I guess it is, but there's layers to it. Anyway, you know what I mean. Different doesn't always mean better. The actual core loop of waiting and dodging the balls just to do it over and over, I don't know, it's not bad, but I'd say tedious might be a fair way of putting it. And I don't normally do this, but I actually have an idea on one way I could have improved this fight, at least in my head. I think it would have benefited from the inclusion of a moving platform. As it currently is, it stands flat and stationary in the arena and leaves little room for dynamic interaction. Introducing like a moving floor for Sonic to actually run on, or making the platform that you need to jump on move, even if it's just slightly horizontal, like left and right movements, would have added a layer of timing and positioning that would have made simple patterns feel way more engaging and added an extra layer of depth. Design is a 3 out of 5. From a design perspective, Ball Shooter is at least interesting. The hovering turret design is more unique than Eggman's typical arsenal in this game, and it matches the industrial high-tech feel of Launch Face Zone quite well. Visually, the fight looks decent, and the decision to station the boss in one place gives it a bit of a mini turret challenge vibe, and I'm all here for it, I guess. Final score? It is a 7 out of 15. Ball Shooter stands out in Sonic 3 for trying to be different, and in some ways it succeeds, other ways it does not. It's an easy fight with limited variation, and while the design fits the zone and the idea is relatively sound, it's not enough to carry the whole encounter, unfortunately. Compared to other experimental bosses in the classic Sonic series, this one just doesn't hit the mark. The Graviton Mobile. The Graviton Mobile operates in a timed electromagnetic pull rather than gravity manipulation in terms of flipping the stage or something similar. When activated, it draws the player towards the centre using electrical arcs, restricting horizontal mobility. The boss arena also suppresses bounce height and increases the effect of weight movement. Basically, it makes you feel kind of grounded, and when you watch the ball drop, it also feels like it drops suddenly. I know that's not a literal mechanic, but they managed to capture the essence of that pretty well. Challenge. It's a 2 out of 5. The electromagnetic shocks from the mech activate at regular intervals and are easily anticipated. The attack's slow build-up gives the player enough time to evade with ease. The boss's hitbox is exposed predictably after this, as conveniently, Eggman decides to lower himself at an excruciatingly slow pace. Honestly, I think he is trying to lose this one, so he can show off his other mechs to Sonic. Like, we wouldn't want those to go to waste now, would we? Enjoyment. It's a 2 out of 5. The altered physics, in terms of movement, are a brief change of pace. Player input is reduced to avoiding a single repeating threat, however, and landing hits during a generous window. The fight ends quickly once the pattern is recognised, with a minimal deviation between attempts. Design. It is a 3 out of 5. This boss integrates the theme of Carnival Night really well, to be fair, as the zone's electrical elements are the core of this boss's threat. However, the mechanics do not evolve, and the central gimmick is not expanded beyond its initial function. Final score. It is a 7 out of 15. The Graviton Mobile introduces a unique environmental constraint and synchronised attack pattern, but unfortunately it does lack mechanical depth. It's a okay design. It suits Carnival Night, as we mentioned, but the actual fight is predictable, slow, and low complexity here, so yeah, I feel like a 7 out of 15 is warranted. The Big Shaker. Right, so the name Big Shaker and where it came from is anyone's guess. It sounds more like a premium milkshake than an underwater weaponized turbine. There's no official naming for this boss that I could find in Sonic 3, so this likely comes from fan guides or internal Sega material somewhere, but it doesn't really match the vibe. The name isn't the problem though, the gameplay is. I'm joking. Anyway, challenge. It's a 3 out of 5. Big Shaker's challenge is built entirely around the environment. The boss itself doesn't attack in a traditional way. It just creates a vacuum that sucks you in and bashes you against the bottom of the mech. That means the real challenge here is positioning and how good your movement control is, not reacting to said patterns or dodging projectiles like you would see in other boss fights. The only attack it has otherwise is when it swoops in the water for brief moments, but that is relatively easy to dodge. Because you're underwater though, your movement is severely limited. That sluggishness amplifies the difficulty. Mistimed jumps or poorly aimed spin dashes can easily cost you rings or even potentially death here. It's not a hard boss in concept, but the game's systems around it, basically what I'm saying is the underwater physics, make it more punishing than it needed to be. It's a boss that demands respect from players that are used to breezing through early game zones. Enjoyment. It's a 2 out of 5. Okay, so here's the core issue for me. Fighting underwater just isn't that fun in Sonic. The series thrives on momentum and flow, and this boss unfortunately kills both. You're constantly fighting the physics as well as the boss. And while there's a mechanic where you can spin dash out of the water, it is finicky and, to be honest, it leaves you exposed quite often. There's satisfaction in pulling it off, sure, but it's inconsistent, and that kills replayability. Design is a 3 out of 5. Visually though, Big Shaker works. The tight underwater chamber, rising bubbles around you, and the general aesthetic, all kind of fit the zone's theme. The industrial machinery fits in that Hydrocity zone's aesthetic that they were going for, and there's genuine tension here. The sense that you're trapped in a pressurised death room with nowhere to go is kinda scary. It's moody and claustrophobic, let's say, and that atmosphere does go a long way. The boss itself is a solid piece of Eggman engineering. It's not flashy, but it feels like a practical underwater machine turned into a weapon. The final score is an 8 out of 15. The Big Shaker is a mixed bag. It's a rare early game boss that emphasises spatial awareness over aggression, and conceptually that makes sense. But concept doesn't always translate to execution. The underwater physics and tight spacing create a fight that feels, let's say, more restrictive than exciting. There's challenge there, sure, but it's not particularly rewarding to overcome. What saves it from a lower score in this scenario is its commitment to the atmosphere. This boss feels like it belongs here, and even if it's not fun to fight, it is a memorable boss, at least to me. It takes a risk by doing something different, even if that risk doesn't quite pay off. Fire Breath Robot. The Fire Breath Robot is a perfect example of a boss that leans more on atmosphere and setup rather than its raw difficulty. It plays a key role in Sonic 3's storytelling by triggering one of the game's most memorable moments, the island starting to burn down around you. But when it comes to the actual fight, it's pretty straightforward and brief. It teaches the player brief mechanics that then they will use further into the game at least. Challenge. It's a 2 out of 5. This boss isn't very challenging. The fire attack is easy to dodge, and the fight usually ends in seconds if I'm honest. I also have a personal little headcanon that piling on damage earlier in the zone when it comes to burn the scenery actually might make things easier, as you have to hit it less in the actual boss fight, but I'm not sure if that even changes the difficulty or if it's really true, so don't hold me to that. But either way, it's quick and a straightforward fight. Enjoyment. It's a 3 out of 5. I actually find some personal fun in seeing how many hits I can get in early before the boss fight kicks into full gear. This is as it's, lowering down slowly. I find it quite fun to see if I can beat it first. And the simplicity of the fight means it doesn't get overly frustrating, and the quick pace keeps the overall fight moving. While it might lack depth or variety, it's not really a drag to play through either, so it is pretty inoffensive. The excitement from this fight really comes from the environmental impact and what it represents in the stage's progression, not just the fight mechanics. Seeing that fire burning in the background adds a layer of tension to me, and yeah, it's so cool. Design. 3 out of 5. This boss scores points for its role in stage transition. The island burning down around you, as I mentioned, adds drama and excitement, and having the boss be the cause of that before you even get to fight it, to me, that is peak game design right there. But the downside, the boss itself is incredibly simple and easy, which drags it down a little bit. Final score. It is an 8 out of 15. The Fire Breath Robot delivers more in setup than execution. It's a quick, easy fight that lacks depth, but the dramatic environmental storytelling makes it a memorable moment in the game. The Screwmobile. Unlike Big Shaker, Screwmobile actually fits the boss. Sorry, the name of Big Shaker is still getting to me. Oh man, I need to let that go. Anyway, it's a turbine-based machine that uses a water vortex as a weapon, and Screw clearly refers to the propeller mechanism at the heart of its design. It's rare for classic Sonic bosses to have names that make mechanical sense, and this one does. I'll drop it. Anyway, challenge. It's a 2 out of 5. The Screwmobile introduces a unique suction mechanic, but the challenge never really ramps up to a high level. The timing window to avoid being pulled into the vortex or slammed against the Eggman mech is fairly generous, so the fight rarely feels overwhelmingly difficult. Enjoyment. It's a 3 out of 5. When compared to the Big Shaker, for example, Screwmobile is noticeably more dynamic and engaging. The water vortex mechanic adds tension without hampering control, giving the fight a satisfying rhythm. Bait the suction, evade, and then strike when you get your chance. You're still slightly underwater, but the flow of the fight feels better and less sluggish as you're not fully submerged. The fight can be over quickly once you get the hang of it also, but pulling off perfect timing to avoid the suction entirely and land hits is rewarding enough to keep the fight very enjoyable. Design. It's a 3 out of 5. Visually and thematically, Screwmobile fits Hydrocity Zone perfectly. The design balances the amount of water just right. There's enough water in the arena to make the suction mechanic feel natural and present, but it's not so flooded that movement becomes a chore or frustrating. This balance keeps the fight from feeling like a tedious underwater slog. The machine's industrial turbine look feels like a believable underwater weapon, which complements Hydrocity Zone's aesthetic. The environment and boss design come together to reinforce the zone's mechanical and aquatic theme without detracting from the actual gameplay. Final score, it is an 8 out of 15. Screwmobile is a solid mid-game boss that balances theme and gameplay more effectively than most. It builds tension with its suction mechanic and limited arena space, but it doesn't rely on cheap hits or overly complex patterns. It's a boss that forces you to respect positioning and time your movement, especially in a game where speed can usually be the answer. It's not a standout highlight by any means, but it earns points for creativity and execution. It knows exactly what it wants to do, and it pulls it off cleanly. The Excorcher Mark III. The Excorcher Mark III is easily the toughest of the Excorcher models so far, but that's not really saying too much since the earlier ones were pretty easy to beat. It's a solid step up in terms of challenge and spectacle, making it a satisfying encounter with Eggman in Sonic 3. Challenge. It's a 2 out of 5. This fight isn't particularly difficult, and you can usually beat it pretty quickly. The biggest threat is the instant death pit, so as long as you keep your eye on your footing, you're mostly chilling in this fight. It doesn't demand a lot of strategy or precision, making it relatively low pressure compared to other fights in the game. Enjoyment. It's a 3 out of 5. The fight's mobility, especially when Eggman's mech slips behind the waterfall and darts from side to side, adds a nice bit of flair. That movement makes landing hits feel, genuine and rewarding, so it's fun to take down this boss. While it's not the most complex fight, there's enough action to keep it engaging without it overstaying its welcome. Great early game boss. Design. It's a 4 out of 5. As Eggman's first real appearance in Sonic 3, the fight does a great job showing off what he is capable of. The airship from Flying Battery Zone can be seen bombing Sonic as he escapes with Tails, and that is super cinematic, like as an early version of a cutscene from video games. Chef's kiss, it is literally so beautiful, very well made, and it nails the drama and spectacle perfectly. Final score, it is a 9 out of 15. While it's not a major challenge, the Excorcher Mark III stands out for its style and presentation. It sets the tone for Eggman's role in the game, blending fun gameplay with some genuinely cool cinematic moments. Big Eistus. Big Eistus is a solid mid-game boss that doesn't quite reach the spectacle of Sonic 3's standout encounters, but still delivers a tightly focused fight with strong thematic ties to its zone. It's not flashy and doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it's functional, fair, and surprisingly satisfying when approached with a bit of patience. The setting does a lot of heavy lifting here also. The chilly, dark ocean backdrop and icy platforms create an atmosphere that's cold in both tone and setting. Challenge is a 3 out of 5. At first glance, Big Eistus can seem deceptively tough. The boss swoops low with wide arcing motions, and the falling icicles add a layer of chaotic pressure. However, once you get a feel for the pattern, the fight becomes very manageable. Hugging the corners of the arena during its swooping dive is a reliable way of avoiding contact, and learning to anticipate where the icicles will land turns frustration into, a rhythm, almost the opposite. It's one of those bosses that rewards repeat playthroughs more than your raw skill on your first playthrough. The challenge comes less from reaction speed and more from reading the arena, knowing when to move and when to wait. Not too hard and not too easy. Enjoyment. It's a 3 out of 5. To me personally, there's something inherently satisfying about fights that you can gradually master through repetition, and Big Eistus definitely falls into that category. The timing-based nature of its attacks makes dodging feel rewarding, especially if you're aiming to complete the fight quickly and cleanly. While it may not be the flashiest gameplay moment, there's a good sense of flow once you're in the groove, dodging projectiles, sneaking in hits where you can, and avoiding unnecessary damage. It's not the kind of boss that wows on first impression, but you know what, it definitely grew on me. Design is the 3 out of 5. Visually and thematically, Big Eistus fits Ice Cap's zone beautifully. The floating ice platforms tie in neatly with the falling icicle hazard, a rare moment of environmental synergy between level and boss. And the dark, frigid ocean setting provides a quiet sense of tension. It's a scenic encounter, with just enough moodiness to give it weight. The boss design itself is a bit plain, especially when compared to the more outlandish contraptions Eggman brings out in later zones. But what's here makes sense and feels deliberate. It's a restrained design that favours cohesion over spectacle, and you know what, in that context, the boss looks great. Final score, it's a 9 out of 15. Big Ice doesn't push boundaries, but it does do its job well. It presents a fair challenge that feels more manageable with each attempt, and its theming ties strongly to the zone it caps off. The visual atmosphere elevates slightly above just another mid-game boss, even if the fight itself doesn't leave a huge impression. Not every boss needs to be a showstopper. This is one point I always try to get across. Not everything is 10 out of 10, but sometimes the 8s out of 10, the 7 out of 10s are exactly what you're looking for, and I think Big Ice delivers in this category perfectly. Twin Hammer. Twin Hammer is a competent and well-placed boss that kicks off Launch Base Zone. Structurally, it's pretty straightforward, a dual-armed mech that gradually loses its threat level. But what is interesting is how the fight actually gets easier over time, which subtly inverts the usual boss difficulty curve. It's a small twist that helps an otherwise, not so standout fight becomes a little more memorable. Challenge. It's a 3 out of 5. The Twin Hammer is a rare example of a boss that starts at its most difficult and progressively gets more simple. At the outset, the dual spilling arms create a surprisingly tight space, making it tricky to sneak in safe hits without getting tapped. Once you knock off one arm though, the threat level drops significantly. You gain more room, more rhythm, and a lot more control of the fight. Personally, I tend to damage boost through this one because trying to avoid the hits cleanly can be a little finicky, especially if you're trying to beat the game as quickly as possible. It's not the hardest boss by any means, but it does keep you on your toes. Enjoyment is a 3 out of 5. You know what, there's not a ton to say here for me. Twin Hammer is one of those middle of the road bosses that feels perfectly fine and doesn't leave a particularly strong impression on me either. It does what it needs to do, it doesn't overstay its welcome, and it wraps up Act 1 in a way that feels mechanically clean, and not really that exciting either. Design. It's a 4 out of 5. Despite its forgettable presence, Twin Hammer is actually a well designed encounter. The difficulty is balanced and challenging enough to feel like a boss, but not so punishing that it becomes frustrating. The visual design of the mech fits Launch Base Zone's mechanical theme nicely, and seeing Eggman deploy the machine beforehand adds a small cinematic touch that gives the fight a bit more narrative weight. It feels more purposeful than some of the more drop-in boss fights earlier in the game. The transformation from a 2-arm threat to a 1-arm cleanup also adds light progression elements that makes the design feel a little more dynamic than it did at first glance. Final score, it's a 10 out of 15. Twin Hammer may not be the most memorable boss in Sonic 3, but it serves its purpose effectively and needs to be complimented for that. It has a unique difficulty curve and a solid thematic fit, and a design that supports the tone of Launch Base Zone. While the fight itself isn't that difficult, there's nothing inherently wrong with it either. It's a classic case of functional and flashy in one. Beam Rocket. Beam Rocket is one of the most polished and satisfying bosses in Sonic 3. No, scratch that, in the Sonic trilogy, and a fitting climax for the original and Knuckles version of the game. Challenge. It's a 3 out of 5. There's a surprising amount to manage here. The dual laser beams are fast enough to demand proper timing, and the vertical movement of Eggman's mech keeps you guessing about positioning. Add to that the spiked ball mounted on top of the mech, which can easily catch you off guard during an attempted hit, and you've got a fight that rewards patience and pattern recognition. Enjoyment. It's a 4 out of 5. This boss just feels good to fight. It's one of those bosses. It hits that rare sweet spot of being cinematic and interactive. The fight has that distinct final boss energy that I love, especially in the context of Sonic 3. Fighting Eggman in the sky, with Launch Base Zone in the background, and nothing but the blue below, it gives a sense of urgency and scale that few other fights in the game deliver. The varied attack pattern and smart pacing keep things from getting stale, and there's a real satisfaction in learning the rhythm and taking the mech down cleanly. Design. It's a 5 out of 5. Beam Rocket is a standout from a design perspective. It's not just that it looks cool, although it definitely does look really cool, it's that the mech itself is functionally built to test the player's spatial awareness and timing. Every part of the machine serves a purpose: the lasers, the spike ball, the movement pattern. It's a well-balanced fight that feels deliberate, not improvised. The sky-based arena amplifies the drama and makes this feel like a true set-piece moment. It's also one of the few times Eggman's mech genuinely feels intimidating to me. This is obviously, no offense to you, Eggman, if you're watching this, I'm deeply sorry, but most of your mechs kind of don't look that scary or effective. Anyway, final score, 12 out of 15. Beam Rocket delivers on both presentation and mechanics. It's one of the best executed fights in the entire game, with a strong attack pattern, a unique arena, and a solid sense of escalation. While it doesn't quite reach the peak difficulty of what a boss could in the classic trilogy, it's just damn fun, and I do really enjoy fighting this boss. The Drillmobile. Drillmobile is a brilliant boss encounter that completely shifts the tone and structure of Sonic 3's usual end of zone fights. After the lackluster Tunnelbot earlier on in the zone, this airball showdown instantly elevates Marble Garden from forgettable to memorable. It's cinematic, fast-paced, and mechanically distinct, not just for this zone, but for the entire game. It's one of those rare moments where Sonic 3 fully leans into spectacle, and it does not sacrifice any gameplay whatsoever. Challenge, it's a 3 out of 5. While the presentation is dramatic, the actual difficulty level is fairly manageable. Eggman's attacks are slow and easy to anticipate, especially once you recognise the wind-up pattern of his spinning drill. His positioning above the player offers some room to react also, and since he telegraphs his moves clearly, you're rarely caught off guard if I'm honest. However, the absence of a proper floor introduces a unique twist to the risk-reward dynamic. When you lose your rings during this fight, they don't bounce around like they normally would do on another boss, for example. They fall straight down, gone, poof, not to return. That alone raises the stakes a little bit. A single mistake can cost you dozens of rings, with no chance of recovery. It creates a low-key tension that's less about avoiding death and more about preserving your safety net. Thankfully, the fall below isn't instant death, because if it was, oh, I would be so angry. There would be so much rage. But if you do slip, Tails will catch you, reinforcing his role as a true partner here. It's difficult to imagine Tails as being Sonic's equal, especially after Sonic 2 where he definitely feels like a sidekick. But in this boss fight, he definitely feels more like a partner than a sidekick. Enjoyment, it's a 4 out of 5. This is the highlight of Marble Garden Zone. It's fast, fun, and completely different from anything you've done up to that point. The fact that the fight takes place mid-air also, with Sonic being carried by Tails, changes the entire feel of the counter. There's no static arena, no walls or platforms, just you, Tails, and Eggman fighting in the open sky. That dynamic keeps the fight feeling light and exhilarating. There's also a great balance between cinematic spectacle and interactive gameplay. You're still in control, still making decisions, and still reacting in real time. The tension builds naturally as Eggman swoops in and out, and the pacing never really drags because of it. It's fun on your first run, and still holds up on replays thanks to how cleanly it all comes together. Design, it is a 5 out of 5. This is one of the best designed bosses in Sonic 3, hands down. It breaks away from the usual template and fully commits to a unique concept. You're fighting in mid-air, like come on, how cool is that? With no ground beneath you, relying on Tails to keep you airborne as we mentioned, and it really does make him feel like a genuine ally. Final score, it's a 12 out of 15. Drillmobile turns what could have been an end of zone boss into one of the most memorable moments in Sonic 3. Like, whenever I think of Sonic 3, it is one of the first things that pops into my head. It looks incredible, plays smoothly, and introduces new ideas without confusing or overwhelming the player. The challenge is fairly modest, yes, but the fight's unique structure and atmosphere more than make up for that. Big Arm. Big Arm is a powerhouse of a final boss, at least for the first half of the game. A perfect storm of speed, tension, and style that brings Sonic 3 to a dramatic close. It doesn't just look and sound intimidating, it is intimidating. Challenge, it's a 5 out of 5. This is one of the most difficult fights in the entire classic Sonic trilogy. It earns that distinction through speed, unpredictability, and timing-specific mechanics. Big Arm's movement is aggressive and erratic, with less predictable patterns than previous bosses. The arm swoops are fast and hard-hitting, and the grab attack can instantly slam you into the ground for major damage, even when you're in supersonic form. The timing window for jumping and landing hits is tighter than usual, requiring real precision. Combine that with the fact this fight comes immediately after Beam Rocket, and you've got yourself a serious test of skill. It's genuinely tough, and you know what? If you're going unprepared, you're in for a fun time. Enjoyment, 4 out of 5. There's raw excitement to this fight that never really fades. It's fast, flashy and stressful in all the right ways. You're fully engaged right from the second it starts, and the challenge never lets up. The fact you're still in the sky with launch base zone crumbling below adds to the urgency, and while the fight is tough, it's also incredibly satisfying once you get into the rhythm. There's tension here that few other bosses manage to replicate. It's not the kind of boss you casually breeze through. Design is a 4 out of 5. Big Arm is a well-crafted mech with personality and presence. It's got a distinct look that stands out from the rest of Eggman's creations. Bulky, intimidating and undeniably cool. This is Eggman in full desperation mode, and the design reflects that. The sky-high set piece adds drama, though it's admittedly the same arena used for Beam Rocket. Still, the custom boss theme helps the fight stand out on its own, and what a theme it is. Straight up banger. The mech's animation, attack variety and sound design all come together beautifully in a strong, stylish closer. Final score is a 13 out of 15. Big Arm is an exceptional final boss, fast and unpredictable, and packed with abundance of personality. It takes everything Sonic 3 has built up and pushes it one step further, delivering a fight that feels genuinely climatic. While the reuse of the arena is a small drawback, the combination of challenging mechanics and striking visuals makes for one of the best boss fights in the entire franchise. And that is every boss from Sonic the Hedgehog 3, ranked from the lame to the damn right intense. This game brought some seriously cool ideas to the table. This is quite literal in Ice Cap Zone's case. Anyway, and while not every fight's a banger, the highs are really high. Mid-air battles, dramatic finales, and some of Eggman's best and arguably worst mechs all packed into one game. If you had fun with this video, feel free to like and subscribe and drop your own rankings in the comments. I always like seeing what you all think. Sonic and Knuckles is probably going to be next if I'm honest, or I might throw in something totally random. Honestly, who knows? Well, thank you all for watching, and remember, no matter how cool Big Arm looks, he will suplex you as if you owe him money. Thank you for watching everyone, take it easy.